This video is brought to you by Avoto, a professional AI photo editor that allows you to perform routine tasks quickly and then sync your edits to other photos in just seconds. Welcome back everyone. In today's video, we're going to take a deep dive on a topic that is often overlooked and misunderstood, and that is depth of field. While many new photographers are obsessed with bokeh and shooting prime lenses wide open, there is so much more to depth of field than just achieving those beautiful blurry backgrounds. On the other hand, some photographers might set their camera to f5.6 or f8 and leave it there all of the time, resulting in too much depth of field for certain shots. Understanding and using depth of field to your advantage is crucial for improving your overall photography skills. By the end of this video, you'll have the skills to make better decisions and take your portraits to the next level. In this video, we're going to explore depth of field in detail, covering practical demonstrations, comparisons, and real-world examples to help you make informed decisions moving forward. First, we'll break down what depth of field is and why it matters. Then we'll examine bokeh, and after that, we'll see how changing the f-stop can impact sharpness throughout the image in this comparison with our model Chris. Then we'll see how shooting wide open or stop down on set can be used to your artistic advantage. Finally, I'll give you some practical tips for using depth of field strategically on your next shoot. Understanding depth of field is essential for taking your photography to the next level. It will allow you to control what is in focus and what isn't, helping you to create more compelling and professional looking images. And really, that's why I'm here making these videos, because I want to help you improve your skills and get to where you want to go a lot faster than it took me to get here. If you want to help support me to make more videos like this, please click on the links for the gear on screen and in the description. Even if you're not interested in that gear in particular, it will still help me out just a little bit. You can also send a super thanks below, and please like, subscribe, and sign up for the bell. Let's start with a quick explanation of what depth of field is. Depth of field, which you may have seen written before as DOF, is the distance between the nearest and furthest objects in your shot that are considered to be in focus. Several factors affect depth of field. The aperture is a big one. A wider aperture, a small f number, results in shallower depth of field, while a larger f number, a smaller opening, will give you more depth of field. Then there is the focal length. The longer the focal length, the shallower the depth of field will be. And then, of course, there is the focal distance. The closer the subject is to the lens, the shallower the depth of field will be. Increasing the distance between the subject and the lens increases the depth of field. So for instance, if you're photographing someone in front of a wall and you move them close to the camera, that background is going to be a lot blurrier than if you move them further away from the camera and then photograph them again. Understanding these principles is crucial for achieving the desired focus and sharpness in your images. By manipulating the aperture, focal length, and focal distance, you can control the depth of field. An important aspect to note as well is that depth of field is typically deeper behind the focal plane than in front of it. For large apertures at typical portrait distances, the near to far depth of field ratio is close to 1:1, meaning the distribution is nearly equal. But an example of how this works in the real world is when I'm shooting a group photo with 4 rows of people. I have always focused my wide-angle lens. I've used a wide-angle lens and I've always focused on the second row and then used a small f number. Another way to plan a shot is that some lenses have focus scales, like my Canon EOS 35mm f1.4. If you wanted to shoot a group photo, the scale shows you that at f11, everything between infinity and about 6 feet can be in focus. These little tick marks indicate the depth of field for f8, and if you manually focus here, everything between 10 feet and infinity will be in focus. Bokeh refers to the aesthetic quality of the out-of-focus areas in your photos. It is often characterized by how pleasing the background blur appears, especially the shapes and softness of out-of-focus points of light. To be even more clear, when you hear portrait photographers talking about bokeh, they're typically referring to shooting portraits at f1.2 to f2 with about a 50 to 135 millimeter lens and the blur that happens in the background, which then helps to isolate the subject. To illustrate this, I had my trusty model Sophia set up with some Christmas lights in the background. We started by shooting wide open at f1.2 with my Canon RF 85mm 1.2 lens. Notice the large circular bokeh balls in the background. This is because the aperture was wide open, creating a very shallow depth of field. As we stop down the aperture, you can see the bokeh balls getting smaller, and by f11 you can also see the individual bulbs clearly. Also note that the shape of the bokeh changes with the number of aperture blades. Higher end lenses with more blades create rounder bokeh balls, but cheaper and older lenses may give you hexagon or octagon bokeh. By understanding how different apertures affect your bokeh and depth of field, you can make more informed decisions based on the look you want to achieve. And in case you're right there, going to your keyboard right now, let me stop you. There are two accepted or widely used pronunciations of the word bokeh. Some people say bokeh. I've just always said bokeh, so that's what I'm saying in this video. Next, let's look at some portraits I shot with Chris using the same Canon RF 85mm 1.2 lens. We'll compare different f-stops from f2 to f16. At f2, only their eyes are really in focus. By 5.6, you'll notice that the nose ring becomes sharp. The lens is sharpest overall between f5.6 and f8, and at f11, you can see Chris's earring become sharper. At f16, everything from the nose to the ear is in focus, but the overall sharpness started to decline there around f11. You might choose f11 or f16 if you're photographing jewelry, because what's important is that you've got all of the jewelry on the subject's head in focus, and no one is going to see an A/B test between a photo shot at f8 and a photo shot at f16. So just keep in mind that what's really important is that you get the depth of field that you need to tell the story or convey the subject that you're shooting. Understanding the sharpness and depth of field at different apertures is crucial for achieving the best results in your portraits. When you're shooting close-up portraits in the studio, you might be tempted to use a 50 or 70mm lens to get even more depth of field when you're photographing a subject with a lot of jewelry. But as you can see from this comparison with Christian, an 85mm lens will likely make your subject look their best. You can also see how an 85mm is probably a better choice for full body shots too. That is, if you have enough distance in your studio to back up and use a longer focal length. For a deeper dive on this, I will link to a video where you can watch me compare different focal lengths in the studio and how much space you need to use each one of them. After I captured this image of Christian, I had to, of course, retouch it, and that's where Evoto, today's sponsor, comes in. Evoto is a next-generation AI photo editor that simplifies your workflow and unleashes your creativity. You can apply a preset in just seconds or retouch most images from scratch in only a few minutes. Then you can sync your edits to other photos and save tons of time. Two of the features that I love are the clothing wrinkle removal tool, which can remove both coarse and fine wrinkles. You can then reduce your corrections using these sliders in order to refine your image. The second feature I want to highlight today is the chiseled preset that adds contouring to your male portraits. These changes would have taken a long time to do by hand, and with Evoto, it's a breeze. You can also retouch the skin with just a few clicks, and speaking of clicks, please click on the link in the description to get a special offer from Evoto. Manipulating depth of field can result in two different outcomes for your background and your images overall. When I got my first painted canvas backdrops, I realized right away that if I didn't shoot at f8, they tended to look, well, very cheap, like what you would expect from a Sears portrait studio background. Often the purpose of using a quality hand-painted background is to show off the texture in the paint. So that is one approach. On the other hand, you could choose to shoot wide open in the studio if you want the background elements to fall out of focus and isolate your subjects. Here is a comparison with Sophia that illustrates this concept perfectly. I shot this with the same RF 85mm lens and a 1/4 strength Tiffin Black Pro Mist filter. These filters will allow lights in your background to bloom and develop a bit of a haze. They come in strengths, I believe, all the way up to 3 or maybe even higher, and those high strengths tend to look kind of crazy really fast. So these really low strengths are just enough to give a little bit of a look to your images, but not too much of a look. Starting at f1.2, the background is completely blurry, isolating Sophia and making her pop. However, when we switch to f8, you can see the details in the backdrop and the props. Now let's look at 6 images side by side, starting with f1.2 on the left, then f2, then 2.8, then 4, 5.6, and finally f8. You can see how the elements in the background go from blurry to sharp. The key takeaway is that landing somewhere in the middle probably doesn't help you because you're not really isolating the subject and you're not fully showing the details in the background. Most of the time, I do shoot between 5.6 and f8 in the studio to keep those details crisp and enhance the overall quality of the image. But on rare occasions, I will take full advantage of my RF 85mm 1.2 if I feel that the background and props are becoming a distraction. And then of course, I will open up to 1.2 and let everything but the subject's eyes, that little narrow focal plane, that little bit of depth of field, I will let everything that isn't in that little narrow depth of field go blurry. This is a situation where I didn't even hesitate to shoot wide open at f2 on my RF 28 to 70mm f2 lens because the natural environment is often full of distracting elements and blurring them into oblivion is a great choice. To further make my subjects pop outdoors, I will often choose to shoot them backlit so that the sun acts as my hair and or edge light. If I can get the setting sun or rising sun in the frame too, even better. Well, I think that about wraps it up. What I really want you to walk away with from today's video is that selecting your f-stop, lens, background distance, and composition are all important decisions that you could be making to take your images to the next level. I hope that you won't just shoot at the same f-stop all of the time, or set your camera to aperture priority and spin the dial all the way down to f1.2. If we make informed decisions about depth of field, our photos will be better for it. If you have any questions or comments, please leave those below and let us know how you like to use depth of field in your photography. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to up your lighting game, sign up for one of my in-person workshops at johngress.com/workshops, or check out my online members-only learning platform, the Academy with John Gress. Also, please like, subscribe, and sign up for the bell and share this video with your friends. I hope that you have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you soon.